Good morning. My name is Nicole Marin. Welcome to Chile's public policy briefing on energy. The Congressional Hispanic Leadership Institute, or CHLI, as we like to call it, is the premier organization founded by members of Congress to advance the Hispanic community's economic progress with a focus on social responsibility and global competitiveness. Founded in 2003, CHLI is a 501c3 nonprofit and the only bicameral and bipartisan Hispanic-led and Hispanic-serving nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. CHLI is dedicated to fostering a broad awareness of the diversity of thought, heritage, interests, and views of Americans of Hispanic and Portuguese heritage. The CHLI Congressional Public Policy Hill Briefing Series provides a platform for an in-depth dialogue on current public policy issues that affect U.S. Hispanic and Portuguese communities. These are briefings to educate and inform members of Congress, their staff, and the Hispanic communities across the country. Today, the panel will be discussing U.S. energy demand. Industry leaders will discuss how domestic energy production and infrastructure investment support, economic growth, I am so sorry, I misread. Industry leaders will discuss how domestic energy production and infrastructure support economic growth and strengthen supply chains while navigating policy. This is a chance to dive into legislation and get different perspectives. Our guest speakers are going to provide that input. So please take the time to listen to all the different perspectives shared here today and share those with others. Now, before we begin, first I want to ask you to help us share the speakers' points of view as well as your own. So please be sure to follow us on our social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and X, where we are at the CHLI. And on LinkedIn, our handle is Congressional Hispanic Leadership Institute. The discussions, including the questions and answers, are being live streamed through our YouTube channel at The CHLI. The discussion is also recorded so that you can also always go back and view it later if you wish to revisit the discussion that we had today, and also to share it with others. After each panel, after this panel discussion, there will be time for questions and answers. So if there's anything that comes to mind throughout the conversation, please make sure to jot it down. Once the panel has concluded, a member of our team will approach you with a microphone and be able to bring that question forward. You'll notice the screens behind me have a graphic for one of our valued partners, Catch Skills. Catch Skills is a platform that helps people track and showcase their skills, formal or informal, so that you have a complete picture of your skill sets. Catch turns everyday learning into skills that drive growth. So please scan the QR code on the screens anytime throughout this program, and it will take you to catchskills.com, where you can log into your account or create one to enter what you learned today. Now, I'd like to introduce CHLI's President and CEO, Marianne Gomez-Horta, for her remarks and her introduction of today's moderator.
Thank you, Nicole. Again, thank you everyone for being here. Good morning, buenos dias. Energy, as you know, powers everything. Our homes, our economy, and our future. As demand grows, so does the urgency of getting our energy policy to support and plan for our future, which is super, super critical. These public policy briefings provide the opportunity for diverse perspectives to be heard by policymakers and their staff here on the Hill. As America celebrates its 250th anniversary, it's important to remember the extent to which our community has helped build and power this nation. From leaders in energy policy such as Federico Peña, the nation's first Latino Secretary of Energy, to the workers who show up every day to keep the lights on, Latinos have always been at the forefront of America's energy story. The mosaic of voices and contributions is exactly what claims to celebrate this special year. I would like to first recognize board members and advisory council members who are here with us. We already have one here. Congressman Bill Flores is our board member, and I will introduce him shortly as well. We have Maria, who's also from Dominion Energy. She's on our advisory council. But I also want to just pause to introduce a very special group of people who are with us today. So if you are a current or former Chile Global Leader intern, can you please raise your hand? All right. And very specifically for those of you who raised your hand, this is a future discussion for you to pay extra attention. We need your support on all these topics. Yes. So thank you again to the sponsors. This series is not possible without them. Please help me acknowledge them at the end of the list here. Bank of America, Capital One, Charter Communications, Chevron, Citi, Dell Technologies, Dominion Energy, Edison Electric Institute, Halion, Johnson & Johnson, Opportune, Pfizer, ServiceNow, and Verizon. Thank you to our sponsors. I also want to thank the team who puts these briefings together. You'll see them around the program today and also helping us online. Nicole, who you've already met, Bruce, Sophia, Andres, Angela, Adriana, Mercy, Tia, Colin, Sarah, and Maite. Thank you to the team for this wonderful program. Before I introduce the moderator, we have a special message from our Chile chairwoman, the Honorable Ileana Ross-Layton, who couldn't be here with us in person, and I'm going to ask Nicole to help me with that technology part. Got it? While she does that, let me just share with you, we are expecting Congressman Carlos Jimenez from South Florida. He'll show up sometime during the program. Congressman Bill Flores knows exactly what that's like. Yeah. So when he shows up, he will pause the program and we'll go ahead and introduce and pause for the remarks by the Congressman.
Yes, man. Today's discussion. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Congressional Hispanic Leadership Institute, thank you for being part of today's briefing, American Energy Leadership, Powering U.S. Demand. Today's discussion focuses on an issue that affects every one of us. The United States has a unique opportunity to lead when it comes to energy, and not just by producing more, but doing so in a way that is reliable, affordable, and secure so that we can support the needs of our communities, our businesses, and our economy. There are important policy decisions that will shape how we move forward. Conversations like today's help bring together industry leaders and experts to share real-world perspectives on what is working, where challenges remain, and how we can continue to strengthen America's energy leadership. At CHLI, we believe these discussions are essential to building informed, practical solutions that support and better understand growth, reliability, and long-term sustainability. As chairwoman of the Congressional Hispanic Leadership Institute, I am proud to support conversations that bring together diverse perspectives, inform, and contribute to shaping our nation's energy future. I want to thank today's panelists for sharing their expertise and perspectives, and all of you for taking the time to be part of this program. Enjoy today's discussion.
Now I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator, the Honorable Bill Flores, who's also, as I just mentioned, one of my bosses. Bill Flores is a business leader, a corporate governance expert, public policy advocate, and frequent speaker on energy, economics, leadership, and public service. From 2011 to 2021, he served as the U.S. representative for Texas' 17th Congressional District, where he played a key role on the House Energy and Commerce, Budget, Veterans Affairs, and Natural Resources Committees. During his public service, he was widely regarded as a thought leader in shaping national energy policy and economic opportunities specifically for veterans. Prior to his congressional service, Mr. Flores spent over 2 decades in senior executive and board leadership roles across both public and private enterprises. His private sector career focused on job creation, economic growth, and delivering long-term value to a broad range of stakeholders, including public company shareholders, private equity firms, and institutional investors such as pension and retirement funds. He currently serves as the chair of the boards of EROC Electric Reliability Council of Texas and Nauticus, is that right? Nauticus Robotics, which is listed on NASDAQ, and is a director of CO2 Energy Transition Corporation, also on the NASDAQ. Houston Christian University, he's a board trustee, and of course for the board of the Congressional Hispanic Leadership Institute. He happens to also chair our investment committee. He is also a member of the Strategic Advisory Board of Menitan LLC, a licensed CPA in Texas. Mr. Flores holds a BBA in accounting from Texas A&M University and an MBA from Houston Christian University. Join me in welcoming my boss, Bill Flores, as the moderator. I think there you go. I try to get this off. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mary Ann. So I've always felt like I work for Mary Ann. I think all of us know that. So it's good morning. It's great to be back in Washington. This panel is a continuation of a panel that we had about 8 months ago up here in Washington. But we're going to talk about other aspects of the energy space today. As you heard, my name is Bill Flores. I don't need to introduce myself. Today's discussion brings together leaders at the intersection of energy, critical infrastructure, policy, and innovation across private and public sectors. What makes this panel powerful is the diversity of perspectives shaping the future of energy self-reliance, sustainability, and ultimately energy dominance. In short, this panel will explore how the U.S. energy will help keep up with this country's future demands. All of these matters have a profound impact on national security and economic opportunity for hard-working American families. And I'm hoping that our panelists can weave those concepts in to their answers as we go through this panel. Over the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to have an open discussion. Then we're going to open it up to Q&A. So be thinking about your questions. If you hear something that piques your curiosity, be sure and start formulating your question because you'll have a chance at the end. I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. Let me start with Ashley Nichols McManus, Vice President of Lot 16.
Great, thank you so much, Congressman, and thank you all for having me here today. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm Ashley McManus. I'm the Vice President at Lot 16. We are a government relations and communications firm here in DC. But before I came to Lot 16, about a year and a half ago, I spent over a decade on Capitol Hill. Spent most of that time actually here in the House of Representatives, serving on the Republican staff of the Committee on Natural Resources, where I was staff director for the Energy and Mineral Resources Subcommittee. So, thank you.
So Rick Perez.
Well, thanks, Bill. My name is Rick Perez. I've had the honor of being in the energy business for over 45 years. 32 of those as in the Westinghouse Electric Company, finishing there in 2014 as the Chief Operating Officer of Westinghouse. Then moved over to the Tennessee Valley Authority for the next 6 years, where I retired as the Chief Administrative Officer there. And since that time, I've been really consulting throughout the energy field and have now the honor of being on the board of a Mid-Atlantic utility that has oversight for electricity throughout the Mid-Atlantic area and 5 nuclear plants in New Jersey and Pennsylvania.
Go ahead.
No problem. Thank you, Bill. My name is Maria Pia Tamburri. I am the Vice President of Intergovernmental Affairs and Economic Development at Dominion Energy. We are a utility that serves Virginia, South Carolina, and a very small piece of North Carolina. So my background, I actually used to work in this building. I worked on the Hill for about 2 years in Judiciary Committee and House Government Reform, and that was a long time ago, so I'm not gonna date myself. But I also worked in the Bush administration for 8 years and have done multiple senior level jobs, also in just private sector. I'm really excited. I'm relatively new, I would say, to the energy industry. I've been with Dominion for a little bit over 7 years, and I just find it to be a fascinating industry and one that's definitely going through some changes as we're going to be discussing now. So it's a great industry to be in.
Daniel?
Thanks, Maria. My name is Daniel Simmons. 28-ish years ago, I moved out here and I interned on Capitol Hill. That was the first thing I did when I moved to DC. I don't think I was planning on staying then, but I haven't left. Maybe unfortunately. But so I interned and then was later professional staff on House Natural Resources Committee. Then I spent almost 15 years, I guess, doing working for energy nonprofits. And then I spent 4 years at the Department of Energy during the first Trump administration. And I led the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy and was confirmed by the Senate to be the Assistant Secretary for that office. So that was a fun job when you think about the Trump administration and renewable energy. It was a good time. It was a good time. There was controversy and there was a lot of fun. But it was great. It was a great job. And since then, I'm a consultant now, and I consult for people that really want to spend most of my time on like how the Department of Energy works and what I can, how to help people navigate, because it's not necessarily, the Department of Energy is a weird animal. I'll just say that. So anyway, it's great to be here today and to talk about energy. It's fun.
Thank you, Danny. Well, let me start with a little bit of a macro background. So if you think about sort of the two big issues outside of the scandals in Congress that people are talking about, the two big issues are who's going to win the AI race, and the other has to do with the conflict in Iran and the impact that it's had on energy supply and even things like helium. I remember when I was on the Natural Resources Committee before Ashley was a part of it, and one of the big issues we had to deal with was helium supply then. And now helium has moved into the news again because of the attacks and the Iranian attacks on facilities in Qatar. So if we think about that, what are the precursors to winning in AI, and what are the precursors to making sure that we can solve our energy challenges when you have a conflict like that in Iran that pops up? You've got electricity demand, you've got data centers, you've got supply chains, critical minerals. All these are important aspects that we're going to talk about today and need to be solved if we're going to continue to be a leading economy. There's a book that I read a few years back, and it said there are no rich countries that are energy poor. If you want to have a vibrant economy, you're going to have a robust and secure energy supply that's attractively priced. So that's something to keep in mind as you move forward. There's another interesting book you may want to read that I'm in the process of just finishing now. It's called Chip War by Chris Miller, that talks about the race to predominance in semiconductors and how somebody's ultimately going to lead in the AI race, AI contest, and hopefully it's the United States. So take a look at that when you get a chance. And then the other thing that we have, the other key input is workforce and labor. What does the workforce of the future look like, and who is going to fill those roles? Because we think that's a real opportunity for the Hispanic community to lead. So with that as our backdrop, let's start with the first round of questions. I want to ask each panelist to keep their questions crisp and limited to about 2 minutes each. This is Washington, though. I know that's difficult to do, but we're going to try. Ashley, let's start with the confluence of a very timely subject, critical minerals and energy. As the U.S. accelerates toward a more energy-intensive and technology-driven economy, demand for a wide range of minerals is growing rapidly. Can you discuss the current minerals policy landscape and how Congress and administration are seeking to address challenges in this mineral supply chain?
Absolutely, thank you. So as we think about meeting growing U.S. energy demand and winning the AI race, as you mentioned, we have to think about our ability to access the building blocks of our energy infrastructure, and of that infrastructure like data centers that we need to win the AI race. So we have to go all the way to the top of the supply chain, right? And think about our access to critical minerals and whether we have not just the access, but the capacity to mine, process, and refine them in the quantities that we need for today's economy and to provide for our country, but then also to our allies, right? So minerals like copper, lithium, uranium, tellurium, rare earth elements, the list goes on and on, right? Are critical to our energy sector, and demand for these minerals is only going to grow, right? It's not going anywhere, but it's going up. So, for example, demand for copper. We think about copper as something that we have in abundance in the U.S. We produce a lot of it. We have a lot of it in terms of our resources and reserves. But We know that demand is actually going up. According to a recent S&P Global report, demand is going to increase by over 50% just by 2040. That's a lot. It's a lot of copper. We can tap into it, but we need the tools to be able to do it. That's just one example. So at the same time, there is a growing recognition that we are far too reliant on foreign sources for our critical minerals, right? And a lot of that reliance is on China, unfortunately. You may have seen the U.S. Geological Survey. It publishes a really interesting report every year called the Minerals Commodity Summaries. And last year they reported that we are over 50% net import reliant on over 50 mineral commodities, and China provides the majority of 32 of those 50 mineral commodities. So it's a big problem. So we're seeing members of Congress, the Trump administration getting really serious about addressing these challenges, but it's really not an easy thing to do, right? It happened over a long period of time, so it's not going to get fixed quickly. There's certainly a renewed focus on the permitting side of the equation, permitting new mines, streamlining the permitting process, making it go faster, to the extent that we can under the current legal structure. But we're also seeing policymakers put real time and energy into the financing side of the problem, which is a really tough nut to crack. So the Trump administration, they're taking a fundamentally different approach than we've seen previously. They are issuing loans to new projects to get them off the ground, sizable loans. They're taking equity stakes in mining companies. That's a new thing. And they're also looking at novel pricing mechanisms like price floors as a part of their trade policy and seeing if that's something that's workable. So it's an exciting time in that there's an unprecedented interest and focus on the need to reshore our mineral supply chains, but it's also a huge challenge, and we're seeing a lot of new approaches, a lot of new tools that we haven't really seen applied to this sector before. So we'll see that moves the needle, but we need to start doing that if we're going to be able to actually source the building blocks of our energy infrastructure here in the U.S.
So as you can see, this all starts to build together, it all ties together, starting with the basic elements like critical minerals. If you want to lead the AI race, you've got to start with things like critical minerals. Rick has actually just shared critical minerals and supply chain are drivers of U.S. energy policy, and you've run huge projects in your career. What are one of the two that involve complex supply chains? What are the one or two most practical things that Congress and the industry should do in the next few years to build a stronger domestic energy supply chain so that we can meet demand growth without breaking reliability or people's wallets?
Yeah,
The latter part's pretty important.
that is very important. Yeah, I would just first start thinking about what a supply chain is, and Ashley touched on it. But let me give you a mental picture of what it looks like. I mean, a strong supply chain, all the way down from minerals to actually generating electrons. Really, it's all about strands, okay? Just like a piece of rope, right? If it's just one piece, it's easy to break, okay? When you got to have multiple strands to make a strong supply chain. So what does that mean? That means you've got to have redundancy at home first. Secondly, and this is something that's always really difficult to manage, is you got to have trusted allies. And in this world, it's really hard to have everything in the contiguous 48 states. Not impossible, but hard. So you've got to have some trusted allies in that structure. Ones that share your values, share your structure, your fundamental principles as a nation. So I know that sometimes it becomes a little volatile in this city, but building at home, having deep redundancy, but also having trusted allies is a big deal. The other one is talent, okay? I don't care how many buildings you build, if you don't have the right welders, the right electricians, the right inspectors, the right people to run them, it won't work. So the fundamental aspect, especially relative to the Hispanic population of this country, is how do we get those young Hispanic men and women who want to build things into this supply chain structure. So building out, working with trusted partners from outside, and really tapping what I think, when I started in this industry 40 years ago, as a young man out of Cuba, how do we get young Hispanics to get into the technical fields that we need for the future? And that's really what we can really look to Congress and the U.S. government, kind of open up the swim lanes. Let American business swim through them. Make the water clear, let us go with relative to how do we get new buildings built out and bring the talent in we need for the future.
Thanks, Rick. So Maria, hot topic, data centers.
Yes.
We just saw that Maine passed a statute, the Maine legislature passed a law to ban new data center development until 2027. And so your state, Virginia, and my state, Texas, are the two leading zip codes where data centers will locate. So there's a lot of electricity demand that comes with those. So can you speak to how U.S. electricity demand is accelerating due to data centers, AI, electrification, and since you participate with Dominion, a vertically integrated, regulated utility, how are you uniquely positioned to plan for that growth?
Well, thank you, Bill, and I'm really excited to be here and to talk about what we're doing. So at Dominion Energy, we have been serving data centers for over 20 years, and obviously we are in Virginia. That is the heart where the federal government is, where the Pentagon is located. So we have been serving these really large entities for many years. So we have a structure in place in order to serve those data centers. And also, between 70 and 80% of the world's internet comes through Northern Virginia. So we are incredibly well positioned to serve data centers, and we have reliability, we have affordability, and we also have, and it's part of our mission, we're increasingly clean. One of the benefits of being a vertically regulated utility is that we own our generation, we own our transmission, and we own our distribution. So we own every aspect of the energy sector within our service territory. And that makes us very well positioned because we can plan. The challenge that we have, as we have been discussing, is that our growth has, we're growing and demand is growing at over 5%. We haven't seen that growth since the end of World War II. So as you're trying to adapt in a system where you have, we're also part of PJM, which is a system, regional RTO, which would be a regional transmission operator. And that means that we work together in these 13 states to share also energy. So whatever we can produce within our state or our service, we purchase from PJM. So there's a lot of different aspects that are putting pressures, but we do have a planning process, which is, and I'm throwing all these acronyms, which is terrible, but it's called a integrated resource plan. So what we do every year is just say, okay, this is what we see the demand's going to be, and what is our company gonna do to meet it? But we also work very closely with our regulators. So our regulators really do a deep dive and say, hey, Dominion Energy, do you really need this demand? And can you tell us why you need this demand? So there's an accountability to it. We cannot build or want to build something unless we can prove that we really need it. So it gives accountability to our customers. It gives accountability to everyone that we're serving in our service territory, and it makes sure that the rates remain affordable to our customers as well. So I think I love the idea, not only that I work at Dominion Energy, but as a customer of the company, that accountability is there. And one of the things that I loved about working at Dominion Energy when I took this job about 7 years ago is that I really spent most of my career in the federal government. And I saw the utility sector to be one that has somewhat of a private to public sector perspective, because you really give back to your community. And we are very conscientious that everything that we do, we want to ensure that the communities are coming along with us. So I think that's really particular, and particularly on regulated utilities.
Well, thanks, Maria. So continue on the data center subject for a minute. The headlines too often say that data center growth causes increases in electricity demand, but Daniel's firm recently published a paper that may have a different viewpoint on that. So Daniel, when you prepared your paper, what questions were you asking when you started your research, and what did you find?
So, so recently I had some questions because there's all this talk about electricity affordability. We see the electricity rates have increased quite rapidly lately, and we see that, when you start looking into what is happening with data centers, especially with AI data centers and electricity use, that demand is skyrocketing. And so the question that I had was, well, are we seeing is there a correlation between where data centers are and with increasing electricity rates? That was one of the questions I had. And then do you see like, so it, like to where, like, do you have more data centers and higher rates currently? Do you have faster increase in rates between where the data centers are? Like, are they driving this increase in electricity rates that we see? And I looked at those questions by looking across the United States, running regressions, and the answer is there is no correlation between where data centers are and either the current rates. You would actually think that data centers would be located in places with lower rates. But there's no correlation between where data centers are and current electricity rates, and there's also no correlation between the increase in rates and where data centers are, which is a little bit surprising. Now, that may change in the future, but I'm just saying, like, to where we are today, to the most recent data, the data for 2025, that is what it shows. And one of the things that has been mentioned is there's a lot of demand growth, and I think Maria mentioned this about how with demand growth for electricity that it's been rather flat for almost 20 years. And I knew that, I knew that's the case, like I pay attention to this stuff. But what I didn't fully understand is that various states have actually increased their electricity demand over that time period, while other states have actually like slightly fallen. And so my question then, and we know that data centers are going to increase, data centers, especially AI, is going to increase electricity demand. So can you increase demand without increasing rates? And so I looked at that question too, and what I saw is that there is maybe the exact opposite correlation that you would think. In other words, in states that have increasing electricity demand, increasing electricity sales, they had a lower increase in electricity rates. So you're selling more electricity and your rates are not increasing as fast as states where you have decreasing electricity sales, which I thought was just kind of fascinating. There are reasons for that are like standard utility economics that we don't necessarily need to get into right now. But the point is this: data centers are not correlated with electricity with high electricity rates, and the growth is not correlated. And we can have demand without having increases in supply. And one more point I would like to make about Maine and what I find interesting about the politics.
Yeah.
Since we're here on Capitol Hill, just thinking about politics, I mean, that's what all of us think about all the time. There's weird politics going on with data centers around the country in these new areas because the world's largest concentration of data centers is in Loudoun County, Virginia. The county that has the highest median income in America. And so you get people saying, do we want to be like Loudoun County? No, we do not want to be like what this county that has the highest median income in America is doing. We don't want to do that. Anyway, that's weird. And it's like, to me, that is just, there is some weird stuff going on, but you know, it's what makes politics interesting.
So when I read your paper last night when I was flying from San Francisco, it was kind of like, the way I looked at it, it's all about the denominator. So
Yep.
if you have an investment in your grid, and you're growing the number of participants that are using that grid, your cost per unit comes down. And that's what the real factor is. So if you have a growing state, growing demand, you average that investment over a larger base, and so you pay less per unit. If you have a shrinking state, you're paying the same base over a smaller number of people. So anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting. So great thing to read. I didn't understand all the formulae because, you know, it was 2 o'clock in the morning, but we'll get there later. Rick, so we've talked about demand growth, resource mix, and affordability. You've worked across nuclear, gas, renewables, and you now serve on a major utility board. As we add a Texas-sized chunk of demand to the U.S. grid, how do we keep bills affordable and still keep the lights on? And what should the mix of firm generation, I call it dispatchable generation, renewable storage, transmission, and efficiency look like?
Yeah. So I'm on a board of a utility that has exactly your issue, right? Our usage, our supply is going down, our demand's going down, but our rates are going up. So it's a challenge to explain that. But when I look at, you know, what we have to face every day, it's almost like put yourself back in school for a second. You know, you're you're in high school and you tell your parents, hey, guess what? Everybody from my school is coming over today and they want to plug in their car, their laptops, their phones to charge them up. Okay, that's how it feels when you're sitting in the boardroom. It's like, whoa, like the tsunami's hitting you, right? So how do we deal with all this stuff? And there's unbelievable moving parts to it, right? I mean, relative to data centers, not all locations, you know, are the same for data centers. The location matters for a lot of reasons, which, you know, it's too detailed to go into it. But fundamentally, there's no silver bullet here. As a matter of fact, when you hear someone say, hey, I've got something, you know, that's all of a sudden gonna weave lead into gold and everything's gonna be great, okay? If it's too good to be true, it probably ain't true. So fundamentally, if you look at how the grid's been run over the last 5 decades, there's one thing that's clear, okay? Just like this thing says, advancing Hispanic diversity of thought, a good solid grid is all about diversity, okay? You need firm power, as Bill calls it, dispatchable power, that kind of sets the baseline. It kind of keeps the river flowing. So you need nuclear, you need gas, you need all those things that basically gives you the fundamental aspect of what the grid is, that sets its stability. Think of it that way. It's what it literally you can stand on. You need renewables to be able to be agile. You know, in summer, man, those things look great. I remember at TVA when I was there, I'd love to see the renewables going up at the same time demand was going up in the summer. Not so good in the winter when it's not light at 7 o'clock, okay? But, you know, those way gives you that agility. You know, conversely, you also better have a strong supply chain, because you gotta get the transmission and distribution. You gotta get the electrons to where people can use them. If you got a weak system and you don't invest in your transmission and distribution, you know, you can't feed the need without the right wires. And then lastly, and this is really important, a lot of people forget about it and it gets a bad rap, the silent hero is also efficiency. You can't be air conditioning, you've got parking lots. And you gotta look at your grid and say, hey, where can I be investing in efficiency? Because the smarter I use the electricity I have, the less I have to spend. Okay, so the cheapest electron that you can pay for is the one you don't have to pay for. So you got to look at that. You know, firm renewables, strong transmission, and efficiency. If somebody tells you that we got to go all nuclear, all gas, all renewables, that's a slogan. It ain't a solution. Okay, so beware of the people that tell you, they'll scream they'll stand on this table and they'll scream. All you gotta do is put a bunch of solar panels in Maine in the winter. It looks great, okay? That ain't true. Again, that's a slogan. They got ulterior motives. They haven't had to live through a heat wave or an ice storm, okay? You gotta have that diversity. Without that diversity, everything kind of crumbles.
Thanks, Rick. You know, there is an eclipse every night when it comes to solar, so we have to remember that. The way I like to say this is that no matter what a policymaker wants, physics and economics is going to control it. So the laws of physics and laws of economics will beat the laws coming out of any legislative body 24/7. Maria, as we've talked, we see tremendous growth in AI and data centers. And how does the long-term planning process work in a vertically integrated utility to manage that growth?
Yeah, and I think Rick kind of covered a bit of, and I mentioned that at the beginning, a long-term planning is really important. I mean, when we do our long-term planning, we're looking 15 years out. So that really gives us the opportunity to say what resources are we going to need to ensure that we can meet the demand, not only today, but in the next 15 years. I think what's really important too is that, you know, we all talked about sort of demand and obviously we talked about what's going on in Maine, but we also have to abide by state law. And I think that's something that's really important. And Virginia, we have the Virginia Clean Economy Act, which is a law that was passed in 2020 that really moves Virginia to be more efficient and increasingly clean in the future. So we have to abide by that law and to meet that goal. So in Virginia, we do have solar. We believe in all of the above energy, and we are completely focused around that. But we do recognize that we need to ensure that we're meeting reliability. For example, in our integrated resource plans, we needed to have a new plant in order to meet the demand, and particularly a peaker plant. And what that means is when we need the energy, the plant can go on. And to meet the demand, so in the evenings, in the time where everyone comes home, on the weekends. So we got that passed by our SEC, and it was a great success that we are able to start building that facility to really help improve and to make sure that we have reliable energy for our customers. Also, we focus on solar, we're looking for new technology. That's part, Virginia announced last year that we are looking for to build an SMR. So that technology, we're gonna be announcing hopefully that soon, of what that technology is gonna look like, as well as focusing on battery storage or anything that is new and innovative that can help us meet the demand for the future. But really been able to plan not only the generation, but the transmission and distribution, and how all those things work together is incredibly important. And to also have a good sense of what we are going to need. Since we are integrated, we can really have a more clear sense of what the needs are going to be in the future. Working obviously with PJM, but also internally coming up with some good data that tells us, look, this is what the future is gonna look like, this is how growth is going to be, and this is what we're going to need in order to meet that demand. Being always cautious and ensuring that we're meeting not only state law, federal law, et cetera. So.
Thanks, Maria. Can I ask a follow-up question? How would you summarize the differences for a vertically integrated utility versus a state that has a deregulated system?
Well, and I touched upon it a bit. I mean, I think we have the ability to look at our energy resources and our needs holistically, because we control the transmission, distribution, and generation in our state. I think it is a lot harder to be able to meet the demand when you can't build generation. There are certain states that the utilities cannot own generation. Maryland is a good example that
Well, most of PJM can.
Correct, yes. So I'm just talking about Maryland. Maryland's actually talking about this precise issue today. Their General Assembly is still in session, and this is an issue that has been front and center. And they're just saying, they're really struggling with, they need to build more generation, but the utility cannot build it. So then they have to purchase outside in the PJM sector. So they have to buy all the generation that they need from outside sources. So that means, how can you control the price if you are constantly trying to buy off a market that's fluctuating? So being a vertically regulated utility gives us that ability to have that control. And plus we have that transparency and accountability to our customers. I mean, they can, when we go to the SEC with a request, we have hearings, and everyone that's for and against can talk about why it's important to them and why they don't think it's a good idea to be built. And for our community, the Hispanic community, to me that's really important. We want to make sure that we scrutinize where things are being built. And the regulatory environment gives you that opportunity. Is it sometimes a bit longer? Yes, but it gives the opportunity to really be able to scrutinize, why do we want to build a facility in this area? And give the reasons of why that's happening. And for minority communities, I think that's incredibly important to have that vehicle, to be able to say, please let me know why there and not in somewhere else. And to be able to say, how are you going to help us? How can we work together in order to make that happen? And I think, to me, that process is incredibly important to provide that transparency and that accountability, not only for us, but for the communities.
Thanks, Maria. Dan, the United States is the world's largest producer of oil and gas, and so transitioning to that subject for a minute, why is the conflict in Iran causing U.S. gasoline prices to rise, U.S. energy prices to rise? And how long will that last after the region is stabilized?
these are two fundamentally very different things. Talking about electricity,
Yeah,
I
true.
have no idea what my electricity rate is from Dominion. I really don't. I really should look it up.
Okay, we can talk after.
It's
I-
cheap
I-
at twice the rate.
it's
Twice the
right.
rate.
I really should look up what that rate is.
That's a good thing that you're not, because
Yeah,
it's
that
not
is true,
high,
that
that's
is true,
why.
because it's not so high that I
You're
stop.
worried about
So I
it,
like
exactly.
open up my bill and like, what is Dominion doing to
Wait
me
till it gets
today?
hot. Wait till it gets
But-
hot.
There ought to be
But
a
we all
study on
know exactly what the
Wait,
price
wait,
of
wait.
gasoline is. Like, it is the world's most transparent price. You don't know what the price of milk is necessarily, but you go anywhere, and the price at the end of my street where there's a gas station was $4.99 earlier today. Anyway, the point is that United, like, it's this wonderful, like, the craziest thing. When I worked on Capitol Hill, the thought was that we would only be increasing our imports of oil, we would only be increasing our imports of natural gas. Now, we're the largest producer of natural gas, now we are the world's largest exporter of natural gas. In LNG, we are now the world's largest producer of oil. These are awesome things, but like when you think about that, it's like, well, why in the world does Iran and like the Strait of Hormuz even matter to us? And the reason, there are multiple reasons. One, we are connected to the global markets. Like our gasoline use is connected to global markets, and that is a good thing. That has been a great thing for ourselves and the world for the past 10, 15 years, because what it has meant is that our increase of oil production has also helped the rest of the world, and so we've had globally lower oil prices and more stable oil prices than we had previously. And OPEC was not able to jack up the price of oil. They very much wanted to. If you follow OPEC at all, they wanted to, they wanted to see oil prices about $100 a barrel, where they are today-ish. That's what they've wanted. And they haven't been able to get there because of American production. That is great. The challenge is what's happened now, is that when we have, when there's more global competitiveness for some of this oil, it really matters. The world, so not only are we the world's largest oil producer, not only are we the largest natural gas producer, but we're also the world's largest refiner of oil. And the largest refinery complex in the world, now, I don't know if that's true anymore, because the Chinese actually have larger capacity for refining than we do now, but we are much more efficient than the Chinese are. The largest complex of refineries in the United States is on the US Gulf Coast. And years ago, when they were built and they were planned, they were thinking that they would be getting more oil from Venezuela, from Mexico, and from Saudi Arabia. And it's heavier oil, it is oil that is called sour, which just means it has more sulfur in it. And so for those refineries to run most efficiently, they need a certain amount of heavier oil. And right now, without the Saudi oil on the market, or much less Saudi oil on the market, there's more competition for that oil. And then there's more competition for the refined products, for gasoline, for diesel. And as a result, more competition is higher prices. One of the interesting things, and we could thank the Canadians for this, in the middle of the country, Kansas up through the Dakotas and Minnesota, the prices of oil or the prices of gasoline and diesel haven't increased as much because of Canadian oil, and it's kind of captive in a way. It's much harder to get Canadian oil out like all the way down to the Gulf Coast, and so as a result you have less increases in prices. So that's kind of fun in just how it works, but being connected to global markets is great most of the time. Right now it is not so great. Oh, you asked me about when? That's a challenge. About when prices would go down, it is a challenge, because right now it's going to be weeks to months to get the situation straightened out, because tankers aren't where they are supposed to be. So it will, once everything goes back to normal, and hopefully that is soon, it still will take a long time, because tankers are not fast moving and they are traveling vast distances.
Thanks, Dan. You talked about $4.99 when I filled up in California last night for a rental car. It was $6.79 a gallon. I just think that was like, ugh. Anyway, Ashley, we've talked about competition with China a little bit. As the U.S. seeks to compete with China on AI and data centers, what should members of Congress and congressional staff be thinking about as it pertains to critical minerals and supply chain?
Sure, absolutely. So one thing to consider and keep in mind is it took a really long time to get here to where we are in terms of this extreme situations, concerning situation when it comes to mineral dependency. This did not happen overnight. It happened over, over 4 decades or so, right? So China has intentionally, over many decades, sought to gain control, not just of the mineral resources and the mining, but also the refining, the processing, the smelting, of those mineral resources that exist around the globe. And we kind of let it happen, right? We kind of let China go out there and do that without really permitting, a lot of new mines here, focusing on increasing our smelting capacity, things like that. So now we're in a situation where we have 2 copper smelters in the U.S. and China has something like 60, right? So it's a pretty serious situation, right? So this has really put China in a position where they can cut off access to supply. We've seen them do that, threaten to do that a few times over the last few years, or artificially lower the price by putting a bunch of minerals in the market and lowering the price and undercutting new projects as they see them start to come online in the U.S. and in the West. So that's why the financing side of the equation is very challenging, right? So it's going to take some time. It's going to take a lot of effort to course correct. These aren't things we can do overnight, but we have to think long term, right? When we think about the policies and the changes that we make, to allow us to actually combat it. So we have a lot of these resources here in the U.S. We don't have all of them. As Rick mentioned, our relationships with our allies are very important here. But these are very long lead time projects, right? And they're very capital intensive. I think S&P Global reported about 1.5 years ago, but it's been true for a long time. It's unfortunately still true now. It takes an average of 29 years to permit a new mine in the United States. And we see it working with with clients all the time. I saw it when I worked on Capitol Hill and worked with a number of industry stakeholders that were looking to locate new mines in the United States. It takes a decade plus just to get through the federal permitting system, right? And then you get the state permitting system. It's very challenging, right? A lot of duplicative reviews. So that's why you're seeing so much discussion about how to provide permitting certainty, not just to the mineral sector, but to the energy sector in general, because it's all connected, right? So, it takes a long time to get these projects off the ground. We've got to think about how to make sure that folks, once they get a permit in hand, they're actually able to produce. So, these are some of the conversations that are happening in Capitol Hill right now. I'll address that, yeah.
Well, let me add a follow-on to that. There does seem to be some bipartisan movement toward permitting reform this year. What do you think the prospects are for permitting reform to actually happen?
That's right. Yeah, a lot of conversations, in the administration about permitting reform. Industry is looking at it. What's the best way to do it? But fortunately, a lot of good conversation on Capitol Hill too about what permitting reform looks like. So, Maria mentioned, there's important reasons sometimes why the permitting process takes a while. You've got community input's important. You see industry, realizing, increasingly that community engagement is paramount and an important part of doing business, a social license to operate. So there's aspects that are going to take time, right? But a lot of these conversations we're having is, what's duplicative? What can we, there's so many statutes that apply, right? There's so many reviews. A lot, I know I'm speaking a lot about minerals because I work with a lot of mining clients, but, there's often, multiple agencies that are involved. Same thing with energy projects too. Multiple agencies that are involved. Is the right hand of the left hand's doing, or, are we looking at the same thing over and over again? So we're kind of looking at that aspect. Where is it, kind of easy to nip and tuck here and there and just kind of have more common sense in the permitting process. So we've seen a lot of progress recently. When I started on the House Natural Resources Committee, where you served and where Daniel also served, it was not as bipartisan, unfortunately, when it comes to the conversation around actually amending the statutes. We had a very hard time, getting folks to talk about these things. We've seen a lot of progress in the last few years. So I mentioned the House Natural Resources Committee. They've done some good work and actually sent some legislation over to the Senate that had bipartisan support. There's something like 10 Democrats that voted for the SPEED Act, which amends the National Environmental Policy Act, which is one of the core statutes governing the process of getting things permitted in the U.S. So that went over to the Senate from the House in December. It's a big deal, right, to have bipartisan support for that. I think just this week, the Energy and Commerce Committee sent some Clean Air Act reform bills over to the Senate. And right now the question is the Senate going to be able to act? Are they going to come together and actually put something forth and send it to the president's desk for for a little while, it looked like things were slowing down. Saw a lot of reporting around this, Democrats concerned, you wanted to make sure that renewables were kind of a part of the equation there, because there's a real need for, an all of the above approach. Looks like we're seeing some progress. The Energy and Natural Resources Committee is talking internally, working on some reforms, and the Environment and Public Works Committee is also talking about need for reform. Ranking member White House just said a couple of days ago they may actually have some text by August, so we're looking forward to seeing that. But increasingly, it looks like probably, if we're going to see something, it'll be, in the lame duck, right? But the conversations are happening, and that's exciting.
Well, we hope it happens. We're going to move to the third round of questions. I'm going to, since we've got about 10 minutes left, I've got 2 rounds of questions I want to ask. So I'd ask every participant.
I'm gonna pause you for.
Oh, okay, I'm being paused.
You're being paused. Let me check out. And we need. Okay.
We're going to pause.
We're gonna pause just for a little bit for our congressional board member to come up and share with us some remarks. So Congressman Carlos Jimenez represents Florida's 28th congressional district and brings a unique perspective to the energy conversation. Throughout his time as a public servant in DC and in his home state of Florida, Congressman Jimenez has championed solar energy expansion and the sustainable energy infrastructure. He's a champion for American energy independence. He has co-sponsored legislation protecting Florida's coastlines from oil and gas exploration, supported domestic energy security measures, and worked to advance next generation energy sources that keep costs affordable for American families. Congressman Jimenez is also a valued member of our Chile Congressional Board of Directors. Please join me in welcoming my other boss, Congressman Carlos Jimenez.
Thank you very much, and it's certainly a pleasure for me to be here today to talk about energy, and the world runs on energy. And when I ran in 2020, I was a proponent of all of the above energy, and I still am a proponent of all of the above energy. And nothing can, but the world still runs on fossil fuels, and will be running on fossil fuels for some time. And so nothing has demonstrated that the vulnerability that America had, and I said had because I'm a little older than most of you. And I remember back in the 70s when there was the Arab oil embargo, and we used to import 25% of our energy, fossil fuels, from the Gulf states, that we had long lines at gas stations and the price shot up. We have a situation now in Iran where a lot of that oil that comes from the Gulf state is now blocked in the Straits of Hormuz. But yes, are we feeling it? Yes, but we're not feeling it anywhere as close as what we felt during the Arab oil embargo. Why? Because America is energy independent. And that's what we have to be, energy independent. And that means all of the above energy. It means solar, it means wind, it means nuclear, which by the way is making a big comeback. And it also means fossil fuels. Because for the foreseeable future, the world will be powered mainly by fossil fuels. We'll be transitioning to cleaner forms of energy. But I also believe that the future lies with something that we had in the past, which is the modular nuclear reactors. And that's becoming more and more feasible. The U.S. government, our Defense Department has recently transported a modular nuclear reactor in a C-47. And that's the way that I believe that we will be powering the future. Nuclear is making a comeback, and it should be, because it is actually the cleanest form of energy. It's not without its risk. No energy is without its risk, but it is the cleanest form of energy. It's cleaner than solar, cleaner than wind, it's cleaner than anything else. Nuclear is the cleanest source of energy. And it's got other things, and it's got other properties that neither solar nor wind has, which is reliability. And so, in order for an energy source, for me, it has to be reliable. Now, with storage capacity and batteries, etc., you can make the argument that solar and wind are reliable because then you store that energy, and when you need it, you get it back. But the most reliable forms of energy actually come from fossil fuels and nuclear. And so that's where I think we're going to be. Nuclear will be more and more prevalent. We will continue to do more solar and wind, but around the world, especially in underdeveloped countries, fossil fuels will still be the dominant source, where I can see for the foreseeable future, 50 years into the future. Because the developed world needs energy. The undeveloped world needs energy in order to develop. And we should help them develop as quickly as possible, because that's the way we save lives. People shouldn't be burning coal, shouldn't be burning wood, other things in order to keep warm at night, in order to have energy. And so we need to help those undeveloped countries to develop their energy sources as quickly as we can in order for them to develop and in order to save lives. And you say, well, what's he talking about saving lives? If you have reliable sources of energy, you're likely to live a much longer life than if you don't. And so there are still parts of the world that don't have reliable sources of energy. We need to help that. And so the future will be interesting. Different countries will have different solutions. We will have different solutions for our energy needs here in the United States. We will continue to be, hopefully we will continue to be energy independent, and we need to be energy independent. We shouldn't rely on anybody for our energy. And so that means a mix of different energy types for different places, and then as we move to a cleaner and cleaner technology. But energy drives the world. You don't have energy, you don't have an economy. And so it is critically important that we have it, and it's critically important that it be reliable energy. And more energy is going to be needed as we have these data centers and AI. They consume an incredible amount of energy. And if we're going to be leading the world, we need to also win the race for AI and the ability to maintain AI and data centers. And so it's vital to our security, the security of the United States, and it's vital to our freedom. In order for us to be free, we need to be energy independent. And in order to be energy independent, we need all sources of energy. So with that, thank you very much. Do you have any questions, or are we good?
No, I think we just need to pause for a photo here.
Very good.
So,
Thank you very much.
if you don't mind, we'll just pause for a photo here, so the panelists can please stand, and we'll get the congressman there in the middle. And then I think I have an advisory council member, Mark. Do you have any other board members here for? Am I missing anybody else? No. Okay. That's it?
Please.
And they have a son of the congressman and the families in the district, right?
I'm very happy to look. Get back far enough. Ready. Looking good, everybody. 1, 2, 3. Love it. Then you look. And last one, big smile. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Please join in a round of applause for the congressman for coming in.
Yes, it's a little different, yeah. I grew up in South Miami, so.
Thank you, Team Jimenez, appreciate it.
Thank you, Congressman. So to amplify what the Congressman said, as I said earlier, there are no economically healthy countries that are low energy countries. So energy is an important key economic input. So we're going to do kind of a couple of lightning rounds really quickly. So Maria, what role do utilities play in attracting economic development, data centers, manufacturing, AI, and so forth?
I mean, I think it's incredibly important to have reliability. Any company that wants to come to a state has to have reliability. What companies are looking for is affordability, reliability, And a lot of them are looking for increasingly clean. If you're talking about economic development with the European companies, they have a lot of goals, sustainability goals that are incorporated in what they want to see when they come here to the US. Making sure that you can meet those demands is incredibly important. As far as data centers, we have, like I mentioned, we have been doing this for a long time, and I think data centers come to Virginia because they know that we have a reliable system and that they can depend on it. And we have a really great system already in place to be able to, bring data centers into our system and hook them into the system. But I think Virginia has been one of the top states for business for many years already. And I think, companies come to Virginia because we're great to work with. And as far as the energy aspect is, affordability, reliability is key. And making sure that we welcome the companies and obviously connect them in a timely fashion and work with them to really meet your energy needs. But yeah, that's what, and Virginia, South Carolina, and North Carolina, we're always open for business.
Thanks, Maria. So, Dan, America 250, as we get close to our 250th anniversary, you've done some research on what sets the United States apart from virtually every other country on earth. Can you quickly explain what that is?
I can try to be quick.
Do your best.
Property rights. That is what matters. There is a fun Latin term, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this, and it is ad coelum, which means that whoever owns the soil owns up to the heavens and down to hell. And that is not true anywhere else besides the United States. And specifically for oil and gas, for minerals, this matters because there is private ownership of the subsurface. And that's not true in Canada, it's not true in England, but it is true here. Because of the revolution, it happened at such a time that they were like, we are not doing what the English are doing, even though they kind of believe in this doctrine, this legal doctrine. So we have private ownership, and private ownership matters because when you're talking to federal bureaucrats, like the federal bureaucrats at the Department of Interior that are in charge of oil and gas leasing, and you have this crazy idea, say, hey, we're gonna inject water and some sand and stuff and some other little chemicals at very high pressure underground, and it's gonna blow the rocks apart, and then we're gonna extract oil out of it, and which is exactly what the hydraulic fracturing revolution was built on, was this, this experimentation. If you're a federal bureaucrat, you're not gonna go for that. You're like, but I just wanna do normal oil. We're not gonna approve this. However, on state lands and on private lands, that's where all the experimentation took place. And so thank goodness there was that private land, so you could have the experimentation, so you can have, so that we can figure out how in the world to do this crazy technology that is the reason that today we're the #1 oil and gas producer in the world.
As a Texan, I can tell you that property rights are incredibly important as the world's leading oil-producing state, well, and natural gas as well. So, Ashley, workforce and economic development. The Trump administration is working to expedite permitting. Can you tell me how is industry viewing workforce development and local engagement as they plan new projects?
Sure, yeah, I'll be brief. I know you asked us to.
Yeah, Dan more than he is.
So when we think about American energy dominance, American mineral dominance, right, there's an incredible, very real opportunity for new and increased jobs that come along with these new projects, right? And particularly when we think about hard rock mines, these are very long-term investments, right? A mine may be, 10-year mine life, 20-year mine life, 30-year mine life, and so these are, very, long-term investments that companies are looking to make, and, they really see that it's paramount that they partner with the community, that they develop good relationships with the community and see how they can benefit each other. But it's really interesting, we look at where we mined historically, and and there might be a question is, okay, is there a future for mining in this area, right? Or, we know there's mineral resource in a particular area, but the economics didn't work before, so we weren't able to mine there, but we know there's resource there. This demand that's being driven by renewable energy, the energy sector in general, AI, data centers, everything else, is opening up a whole new area of demand for critical minerals specifically, right? So where we mine copper, where we mine gold and silver. Now there's actually the economics work to get byproducts that come along with those minerals out and, and actually sell them as well, right? So things like tellurium, rare earth elements, gallium, germanium, things that we didn't produce before, things that we had, but there was no way to actually invest and create jobs for them. Now that we need these things and we need a lot of them, kind of taking a second look at some of these areas and going, okay, we mined in Minnesota in the Iron Range for a long time, but now there's, kind of a new potential for, for copper development there and things like that, right? So there's a lot of workforce opportunities. I know there's, some concern about whether or not the workforce is there, but there's, a lot of potential for mining engineers and things like that. You see members of Congress trying to focus and introduce legislation to get us there and make sure that we have the workforce to be able to fill that demand.
Thanks, Ashley. So Rick, continuing on the workforce development idea, what federal and state, local policy signals do we need to be able to encourage investment in infrastructure that benefits workforce development and local engagement?
Yeah, I think it's important. Why are you guys here? I mean, energy is one of the few areas, okay, in your lives that hits two parts of your pocketbook. One is what's coming in potentially, and then clearly when you pay your bill, okay? So it matters to everyone that you serve and everyone that you know. So what does that mean? I'm going to try to connect something that Ashley and Maria said. There's two aspects, being intentional and creating stability. Maria's comment about an integrated resource plan, why is that important, okay? And what does that mean? Because remember, energy, you got this federal stuff on top, but at the end of the day, it's local stuff. It's Dominion, it's FP&L down in Miami, it's TVA or National Electric where I live. It's about your neighborhood, right? So being intentional in electricity is really important. When I was at TVA, we had to make decisions about where we're going to build a project. Okay, so you talk about whether it's a mining project or a power project, where you build that project matters, okay? Because that's where internships are going to go. That's where apprenticeships are going to go. That's where jobs are going to go. That's where, it's a big one, small business is going to go. So energy is all about what comes in and what goes out. The other aspect of this is stability, okay? Now, you heard a term called PJM. That's a fancy word for it. It's the largest energy market in the United States. It's where electricity gets traded and sold, okay? The perfect example of what not to do, okay? PJM, big demand, okay? And how do they sell power? Oh, you get a price for electricity for the next year. Do you get it for the next 5 years? Oh no, just for 1 year. So who's gonna build a power plant in PJM and bet their company that they're gonna get paid for it, that the power plant they have to recover over 30 years? So guess what? PJM said, oh, maybe that's why we're not getting any supply. So they finally came out with a 15-year commitment. They're just about to do what they call a reliability backstop. So this industry on the local end just needs stability. Just don't whiplash me. Just let me manage my risk. But give me stability so I know you're asking me to put money down, but before the concrete's dry, you pulled the rug out from under me. So stability is really important. Intentionality is really important. Where you build and bringing those things together is really what makes a difference.
Quick question, Rick.
Yeah.
Or Maria could answer this question too. Like, you're asking for stability. Like, what is the price of these power plants that you're talking about?
Well, you're talking big, with a big,
They're big price tags.
Yeah, but so what?
But I
So
mean,
it's minor compared to a refinery.
But I mean, I think the important piece of it is that that's why it's so important for utilities to be whole and to be able to have the resources they need and the credit ratings they need in order to be able to get the credit, in order to build these huge projects, billion-dollar projects. So as we look at utilities, and obviously now with the affordability discussion, I mean, because utilities serve customers and no one really thinks about the work that we do. Like, people come home, turn their lights on and think that magic happens. Well, there's there's a huge amount of people that work every day to make sure that those lights are on. It's from the line worker, the groundsman, like the engineers, I mean, it's unbelievable. And you're talking about so many different aspects of energy that are covered throughout. So you have all these wonderful people that work 24/7 to make sure those lights are on, and you can go to bed and feel really cozy and wonderful. And there's people working all night to make sure that that happens. But I think the one thing I wanted just to, and I know, I'm sorry, that I wanted you to share is companies like Dominion, it is really important that we are, and for us, we're really good at this, that we're in the community all the time. So when you're talking about projects, when you're talking about building, it is not new. We're not surprising anyone. And this is why these plans are really important, because we have a stakeholder process where people come in, even citizens come in and kind of listen to why we're doing what we're doing. So being in the community every day is incredibly important. Getting in early, talking to them about your needs, because that's when you're going to get less pushback, because they understand, they know what you're planning, and they really want to kind of work with you. You're always going to have, people that don't agree, and that's okay, as long as you're sitting at the table with you regardless. We're not going to change everyone's mind, but we want to definitely work together.
But I will say there's something, I don't know if this is where you're going. There's a fallacy that says, oh, I can build these fast solar plants, and I can build these big wind plants, and don't worry, I don't need anything else. That's BS, okay? I had to buy, at TVA, I had to buy 10 gigawatts of solar, okay? Nobody would sell me 10 gigawatts solar and say, guess what, I'm only gonna pay you next year. They all wanted 20, 30-year contracts, okay? So it's everybody needs that stability. So, and by the way, so do you. If you put solar panels on your house, you don't want to say, oh, guess what, the company didn't want to pay for you after all. No, you want somebody to say, I'm going to put a solar panel on my house, I'm going to get recovery after a while. It's a fair deal. So I think all we're saying is, whatever source of energy, let's have some stability and fairness in how we're covering it. And that ties into local jobs and rates, all those things.
So with that, I did have a fourth round of questions. And that was, for each of our panelists, what keeps them awake at night. But we're going to dispense with that because it's now your turn to ask us what's on your mind. What questions did we stimulate that you'd like to know about? So we're going to start on this side of the room, and I'll just work kind of across, if that's okay. So on the corner.
Good morning, thank you very much. My name is Rafael. I am a global leader here with CHLI. I'd like to ask you, Mr. Simons, a question, because you made a bold statement that is quite frankly groundbreaking. I don't think it's been covered by any news outlet, which is that electric generator, I'm sorry, the data centers.
Yes.
Have no relation with increasing cost of energy and electricity bills, and I don't think that's I don't know where you're getting your facts from. In Virginia, over the past 5 years, electricity has increased over 267% because of data centers. I'm from New Jersey. I have witnessed firsthand how these data centers have impacted my community, most of the time Hispanic and brown communities of color. So I want to see where you get your facts from, and if your research has been peer reviewed, because I couldn't find any other facts as to back your statement.
Sure.
Try to do a 30-second answer if we can.
All of the data for that comes from the Energy Information Administration, the premier source of energy data. So that's one, and it also is, looking at the entire United States, looking at state-by-state data. That doesn't mean there is specific circumstances, like maybe in Virginia, that the price may have increased because of data centers. But the point is that there's no overall correlation between where the data centers are and the increase in price of electricity. Like speaking broadly, like that's just what the data show, and the data is from the Energy Information Administration.
Can I respond to the statement?
Sure.
Of Virginia?
Yeah, 30 seconds.
Okay.
15 seconds.
It's her job.
No, and that our rates have not increased 267%. So I just want to make sure that that's really, like, that statement is corrected. So Our rates are looked upon and our commission approves everything we provide for them. And we have rate cases every 2 years. And our rates have been somewhat consistent. We do have separate things like riders that we have to, rates are very complicated. I would highly recommend that you do some research on utility rates because they are very complex, but they have not increased 267%, and we have to build generation in order to meet that demand that we've all been talking about. So that is recoverable for the utilities. And as far as data centers right now, they have a specific rate class that they pay whatever they need in order to come into our system. So if they need transmission, if they need distribution, anything that they need built, the data center will pay for it. So I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that for them.
I encourage you to read Daniel's study, it's really good. So on the corner. 15-second question and a 15-second answer.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for your time. My name is Diego. I'm a CHLI global leader, and my question is, I appreciate the topic and the touch on the affordability aspect of things, of energy. When it comes to clean energy, most of the incentives are requiring home ownerships. My question is, how can we make these savings accessible to renters and to those living in multi-family housing?
And let me answer that one 15 seconds. So we do have a program called Energy Share, and we have a weather station program. A lot of it is centered to homeowners, and I'm going to, but we do supply to renters. We provide energy efficiency assistance to renters. The challenge is it has to be approved by your landlord. So we cannot obviously do anything into a home that the landlord doesn't approve it, but we do have within our energy efficiency program, even within Energy Share, which is our customer support program, we do bill assistance, weatherization, energy efficiency support. We can work with renters 100%. I mean, it's just, it is a little bit more we have to check with the landlord to ensure that they are okay with us going in and supporting our customers. But yes, the answer is, if you're a renter, yes, you can get an energy efficiency support.
We have one over here, third row back, I'll take him.
In Virginia and South Carolina and North Carolina, can I test for any other utilities?
Hi, I'm Damien. I'm a CHLI global leader, and my question is to anybody on the board, the panel. But I would like to ask, the war in Iran is very complex, and we see that we don't. I'm going to just get to the question. Do countries coming to us instead of the Middle East for oil, doesn't it support us long term, and isn't that a good idea? Especially making us an independent country, a power independent country. That's the best thing for us, especially increasing oil sales. Why is that such a bad thing, and why is it seen as a terrible thing to have a blockade when it's good for our energy department?
If I can answer that question real quickly. If you've seen, we've seen a huge diversion of tankers from Middle East sources of oil to the Gulf Coast, to the United States. And why is that? It's because we're a reliable ally when it comes to supplying energy to the rest of the world. And so I think it's a good thing to answer your question shortly. So sorry to preempt the panel. I just thought, since I was 30 years going to gas, I thought I'd go ahead and answer that question. We're going to go over here and take one last question before Mary Ann really kicks me hard for going over my time slot. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning. Thank you guys for coming out. I appreciate it. My name's Lily, and my question is, all this stuff sounds great, and it's a great plan, but what are we gonna do about the blockade that we have with states that have really bad regulation? I'm from California. We actually have a lot of oil in California, believe it or not, but there's so much regulation that we cannot drill and refine the majority of it. So what are we gonna do to get over blockades like that?
Who wants to take that?
Do you want to take that question?
Well, I could take it, but I mean, I hate to do the Texas versus California thing. So, well, let's put it this way. Texas export is is one of the leading exporters of oil and gas in the world. And right now, California, because of some policy decisions it made, particularly with respect to refineries and to its internal oil and gas production, is importing about 75% of its crude oil supply. And it's lost about 30% of its refining capacity in the last 2 years. And so that's the reason you have such high energy prices. Now, what's the solution to that? It's when the voters of California said, we've had enough, and they change who's running things in Sacramento, or change the way the policymakers in Sacramento think. So, sorry to preempt you.
But in general, first of all, I think you're right. But at least I'm hopeful. I'll give you an example, right? I mean, California, what was it, less than 5 years ago, there was a moratorium for nuclear, right? At least somebody in Sacramento finally woke up and said, hey, maybe if you shut down, 4,000 megawatts at Diablo Canyon, maybe that'll be a problem. So they finally woke up and said, so now, as you probably know, Diablo Canyon got life extension. We're going to run for another 30 years. Okay, so very good plan, by the way. But anyway, so I think there is some hope for some changes.
Can I add
I mean,
one?
at the end of the day, the voters will make the decisions that cause those to change. It's just some states move more quickly than others.
And I think the one thing that I would add to this is educate yourself.
Yeah.
Okay? Be careful where you get your information, because there's a lot of information, and I know I have 2 teenage daughters, and they love, surfing the internet, YouTube, or whatever. But a lot of, and I always tell them, make sure your sources are credible. And I will, don't, I know you young people, the younger generation loves to follow, I don't know, whatever you call these people on the internet that you follow them. Yeah, influencers. But I mean, get your information, be educated. The energy industry is very complex. It is not simple. There is nothing simple about it, because you have various different sources of fuel. I mean, there's a lot of complexity to it. So when you're going into a meeting or you want to talk to legislators, make sure that you are educated, that you know what you're saying. Read, I mean, I know it's going to be boring, but go in and start, if you want to know about what a regulated utility does, go and read the transcript of one of rate cases. I mean, you'll sit there for hours or days, but it will be very informative, because you will learn what the process looks like. I think if you're educated and you know, you can educate others. And I think that's incredibly important. And I love the internet, but don't always believe it.
So the answer is you need to become an influencer to change policy in Sacramento.
No, I didn't say that.
I'm just messing with you. So over here, we have one more question, and then we're gonna stop the questions. Yes, sir.
I didn't mean to go over time, but this is a question towards Maria. I know as part of Dominion Energy, you mentioned earlier that Virginia is open to practically all sources of energy, and as Mr. Jimenez pointed out, he emphasized that nuclear energy is one of the cleanest, if not the cleanest energy. My question is, how big are talks about nuclear energy in Virginia, and do you think that it should be more?
Well, I think I mentioned that we have nuclear facilities in Virginia, and we are, and we just extended the permitting for our nuclear facilities. So we've been doing, we've had nuclear facilities in Virginia for a long time. And we just announced last year, like I mentioned before, a small modular reactor, a partnership that's going to be, hopefully we'll be announcing the technology in the near future, of small modular reactor in the same location as one of our nuclear facilities in North Carolina. So we are looking at every source of energy, and we obviously support nuclear energy because we have power plants within our fleet.
All right. Well, this has been a very thoughtful discussion. We appreciate your questions. You just had a master class on everything, from energy supply, demand, property rights, AI, data centers, electricity, permitting reform. So let's thank our incredible panelists for the great job they did. And I would be remiss if we didn't thank the team at CHLI for putting this on. So Mary Ann,
Thank you everyone again for joining us today. Thank you again for the questions. As you all heard and as the congressman here said, it's a master class. Energy is definitely a part of our lives, as we mentioned, our home, our school, our work, our community, so it's really important to, as was mentioned, is to educate and inform yourself. And I encourage you to pick an area of energy. There's a lot of topics, but I encourage you to pick an area of energy that you personally can learn a little bit more about, so that you can also pass information on to others. One of the things that I always say at the end of these briefings is that you are very privileged to be sitting in this room here in Congress. There's a lot of other people that don't have the opportunity to be here. So take the time to learn a little bit more about at least one specific area so that you can go back home and you can share that information. You don't have to wait until the energy company says, we're thinking of building A, we're thinking of expanding Z. You can call your congressman, you can go to the city council, you can go to the county, the commission, whatever it is, and give and share your opinion and ask the same questions that were asked here. You can ask them those same questions. And as a Californian, I feel Lily's pain that, there's a lot of things that go on. You also have to keep in mind, the bigger the states, the more politicians, the more policy, the more layers. So sometimes it takes a little bit longer. But once you get in and you get involved, it's really, really helpful and it's really important. And that's why we make these discussions here, so that you can also help us, help and educate other people. Because not everybody has the opportunity to be here. So I look forward to having you join us for the other conversations that we have. You just met some new influencers in your world, so make sure you follow them for some other information. I also want to share with you our fundraising, our annual fundraising gala is on May 13th here in Washington, D.C. So if you have an opportunity to join us then, please do so. We will be at the Waldorf Astoria. We are honoring and recognizing the work of Congresswoman Monica de la Cruz and Congressman Gil Cisneros from California and from Texas. And then we're also honoring Sarah Garcia. Somebody mentioned the Department of Interior, and she's the executive assistant to the Secretary of the Department of Interior. So we're really excited to honor her as well. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you again. Enjoy this wonderful spring weather and connect with these new influencers in your life. Thank you.